Plato wrote of Atlantis that it was a complex society that lived a utopian existence, its people in harmony with nature and their fellow man. That same harmony can be seen here, in the order and symmetry of the building's engineering, in the way it makes use of the natural flow of the elements. The palace engineers were masters at controlling the path of air and light through the depths of the palace quarters. They devised systems that appear advanced even today, even though they are almost 4,000 years old. Internal rooms were divided with an ingenious system known as pier and door partitioning. Rows of pillars were linked by discrete wooden shutters which could be controlled independently of each other. They could be set to block the path of a cold wind or channel a breeze to the palace's innermost room. At the very heart of the palace is the central court, providing light and air to all areas of the complex. To the east is the royal quarter, a multi-story structure to rival anything described in Plato's accounts of Atlantis. At its heart, a huge four-story spiraling staircase was built around pillared balconies, open to the elements to form a vast light well.
This impressive structure was really one of the great achievements of Minoan engineering. And in the middle of the staircase is this marvelous rectangular light well, which allowed the natural sunlight to diffuse all the way down to the bottom and then outwards into all the rooms which would otherwise have been very gloomy indeed.
This awesome technology and the sophisticated culture that created it appear to have thrived in the Mediterranean for centuries, but then they simply disappeared. Just as in the story of Atlantis, it seems this entire civilization was wiped from the face of the earth in a sudden and violent catastrophe. The first clues to what might have happened lie in the sea that surrounds the island. The whole of the Mediterranean is divided into two tectonic plates, with Europe on one side and Africa on the other. These two colossal land masses collide, and periodically the energy of these collisions is released in earthquakes.
The archaeological evidence for earthquakes is very difficult to detect here, partly because, of course, they rebuilt and repaired immediately afterwards. There is one instance, however, on the south side in the so-called House of the Fallen Blocks. It seems that at the end of the First Palace period, there was a huge earthquake, and these enormous blocks were thrown several meters to the south, and there they remain today as evidence of this enormous earthquake.
Our experts have discovered that the palace engineers devised new and innovative techniques to create structures that would withstand the destructive force of these violent quakes.
Simply put,
Today, our team are keen to learn from the experience of the palace engineers, and they study closely the anti-seismic techniques deployed at Knossos.
In order to make their tall, skinny walls stand up, it's quite probable that the first thing they did was to buttress them up, rather like this. So if I pretend to be an earthquake and shake this table here, well, as we can see, buttressing on its own doesn't do the job.
In the final phase of building at the palace, walls were constructed of stone and supported by an ingenious system of wooden frames. This combination of materials gave the structure both enormous strength and flexibility.
So what the people of Knossos did was to use timber framing to reinforce their thin masonry walls and support the framed up wall off big heavy walls, buttressing like this. And if I pretend to be an earthquake machine again and give it a good old shake, we can rapidly see that I could be shaking that all day long, and this wall is going precisely nowhere.
Despite these incredible engineering achievements, nothing was going to save the palace from the devastating cataclysm to come. Seismologists that have been studying the geological history of the area now believe that Crete suffered a cataclysmic event around 1500 BC. This new evidence shows that Crete was struck by a massive and deadly wave.
Dozens of tsunamis swept across the entire Aegean. Tsunami, tsunami, tsunami. Trains of these waves.
In search of the source of this destruction, experts have focused on a volcanic island 100 miles north of Crete. It was known in ancient times as Thera. Today, it is Santorini. Volcanologist Floyd McCoy has made it his life's work to decipher the geological clues and piece together the island's destructive history.
This volcano has an amazing history of repeated giant explosions. With every explosion, this hole in the ground, which we call a caldera, is re-excavated repeatedly. And every time it blows itself apart, it leaves a deposit on the landscape, and layer by layer, it builds itself up. And so what we see over there are the layers of these repeated explosive eruptions through tens of thousands of years.
At the center of Santorini, inside the cliffs of the main island, is Nea Kameni, the new furnace. It is a barren and hostile island, peaked by the crater of an active volcano. Floyd McCoy has discovered that there was once an island right at the center of the caldera. It was swallowed up by a terrible volcanic eruption.
Occupying this large caldera then was this large island that a civilization lived on. It's gone. The island was blasted to bits.
Plato wrote of a devastating cataclysm that destroyed the great civilization of Atlantis. And Santorini, the closest neighbor to Crete and the Palace of Knossos, was the location of one of the biggest explosions in recorded history. Researchers have developed a new theory that Santorini and Crete were both a part of Atlantis. The theory has its basis in the dramatic color of these cliffs. Plato described quarries in Atlantis where rocks of white, black, and red were extracted from the hills. The rock was then used in the construction of a great island city. The description matches the rocks found here in Santorini. This island city was described as being laid out in a series of concentric circles of land and water, each one connected to the ocean by an immense canal 100 feet deep.
There were also docks for huge numbers of ships and a causeway over which they could offload the riches, whatever they were, that were coming into Atlantis. In other words, everything that human beings could need was available in Atlantis itself.
Plato's description of the island as circular relates perfectly to the symmetrical formation of the central volcanic island on Santorini. But to prove a link is impossible without proof of life on the island before its last big eruption. Then, in the early 1900s, during excavations in a quarry here, a fantastic discovery was made.
That layer, that white layer on top of the cliffs, is a deposit left from the catastrophic eruption in the Bronze Age. And it was digging there that they found a house site. In another case, they found a burial. They realized this eruption had buried a civilization, a culture lived there. The story then of that ancient civilization starts there with that layer of white ash.
These volcanic deposits, which still cover the entire island, fell in the course of a single cataclysmic eruption. Now our experts are stripping back the ash layer by layer to expose evidence of the lost world that lies beneath.
Here it is. This is the level that man lived on, right here. Here, in fact, is what appears to be a remnant of a wall built by man on top. And then the eruption came. The big blast started, and all of this was deposited. This is pumice, and the pumice piled up very rapidly. And then the eruption continued 4 days of a massive accumulation of all of this material all up here, 30, 50, 60, 80 feet of this material piling up. And then way up at the top, the debris flows, the mud flows that scoured the surface. All of this, one of the giant eruptions in human history.